There's a field in northwest Missouri in March that most farmers would call empty. The corn was harvested in October. The stalks were chopped by the stalk chopper in November. The field has been bare since bare ground, corn stubble. The soil surface exposed to 5 months of rain, wind, freeze, and thaw. The surface is crusted, a hard, sealed layer of silt particles that the rain has beaten into a skin so tight that a thumbnail pressed into it meets resistance. The crust sheds water the way a parking lot sheds water. The rain hits the surface, runs off, carries soil with it, and the field gets drier with every rain because the water that should be infiltrating is running off. The field is empty. The soil is sealed. The moisture is leaving. This is what conventional no-till looks like in March in Missouri. And it's what 85% of the cropland in the state looks like between November and April. 5 months of bare ground, exposed to the weather, losing moisture and structure and biological activity to the elements. There's another field, 400 yards east, that doesn't look empty. This field is green, not the green of a crop, the green of cereal rye. Planted in October after the corn was harvested, growing through the winter at a pace that the cold slows but doesn't stop. The rye is 8 inches tall in March, dark green, dense, the plants tillering aggressively, each seed having produced 4 to 6 stems that form a mat of living vegetation so thick that the soil surface beneath it is invisible. You can't see the ground in this field. The rye covers everything. The soil surface beneath the rye is not crusted. It's loose, dark, moist, threaded with the white roots of the rye plants that are holding the soil particles in place and creating channels through which water infiltrates instead of running off. The rye is protecting the soil the way a roof protects a house, covering it, shielding it, keeping the rain from beating the surface into a crust, and keeping the wind from drying the moisture that the soil has stored. The green field belongs to a man named Garrett Holsinger. He farms 560 acres outside of Gallatin, the county seat of Daviess County, a town of 1,700 people in the rolling Los country north of Kansas City. Garrett has been planting cereal rye after his corn and soybeans every fall since 1998. 14 years of cover cropping on every acre of cropland, every year, without exception. The rye goes in after harvest, drilled at 60 pounds per acre with a grain drill, or aerial seeded from a plane at 70 pounds per acre before the corn is combined if the weather is tight. The rye grows through winter, reaches 12 to 24 inches by April, and is terminated with glyphosate 2 to 3 weeks before corn planting, leaving a thick mat of dead rye mulch on the soil surface that suppresses weeds, conserves moisture, and feeds the soil biology as it decomposes through the growing season. The practice had a name in the soil science literature: cover cropping. In Daviess County, it had a different name. The co-op called it planting weeds. Garrett Holsinger is planting rye on his corn ground. In October, he's spending $18 per acre on seed and $6 per acre on drilling to plant a crop that he's going to kill in April. He doesn't harvest it. He doesn't sell it. He doesn't graze it. He kills it with Roundup and plants corn through the dead mulch. He's paying $24 per acre to grow something he throws away. The throws away line was the weapon the elevator used against Garrett, and it was effective because it was superficially true. Garrett planted rye and killed it. He didn't sell the rye. He didn't bale it. He didn't graze it. By every metric the elevator measured, bushels sold, crops marketed, revenue generated, the rye produced zero. The $24 per acre was a cost with no visible return. On 560 acres, the annual cover crop cost was $13,440, seed, drilling, and the glyphosate to terminate. $13,440 per year spent on a crop that died in April and lay on the ground as mulch through the summer. The elevator manager in Gallatin, a man named Rick Conger, mentioned Garrett's cover crop every spring, the way a sports announcer mentions a losing streak. Garrett's rye is up again, green as a golf course. He'll kill it in 3 weeks and plant corn through dead grass. 14 years of planting a crop he doesn't sell. $188,000 in cover crop seed since 1998. That's a nice tractor he's planted in the ground. $188,000. Rick liked the number because it was large enough to sound like a mistake. A $188,000 mistake that Garrett had been making every year for 14 years. Getting greener and more committed and more visibly eccentric as every other farmer in the county left their fields bare through winter, because bare fields were normal and green fields in winter were not. Now let me tell you about what the rye was doing beneath the surface. Because the $24 per acre that the elevator called waste was building something that the elevator couldn't see, and that the drought of 2012 would make visible in the most consequential way possible. Cereal rye roots penetrate 3 to 4 feet into the soil profile. The roots are fine, dense, and extensively branched. A single rye plant produces approximately 380 miles of root length in a growing season. The roots create channels, biopores, that persist after the plant dies and the roots decompose. The biopores are highways for water, pathways through which rainfall infiltrates downward instead of running off the surface. A field with 14 years of continuous cover cropping has a root channel network so extensive that the infiltration rate, the speed at which water enters the soil, is approximately double that of a field without cover crops on the same soil type. Where a bare field absorbs 0.8 inches per hour, a cover-cropped field absorbs 1.5 to 1.8 inches per hour. The difference means that in a 2-inch per hour rain, the bare field generates 1.2 inches of runoff per hour, while the cover-cropped field generates 0.2 to 0.5 inches. The water that runs off is water lost. The water that infiltrates is water stored. Over a season, the difference in stored soil moisture between a cover-cropped field and a bare field is approximately 1.5 to 2.5 inches of additional available water in the root zone. 1.5 to 2.5 inches. In a year with 36 inches of rainfall, 2 extra inches is a 6% advantage, marginal, barely noticeable. In a year with 18 inches of rainfall, a drought year, 2 extra inches is an 11% advantage. Significant, potentially the difference between a crop and a crop failure. The rye mulch added a second moisture advantage. The dead rye mat, lying on the soil surface after termination, 8 to 12 inches of flattened stems and leaves covering the ground, reduced evaporation by 30 to 50% compared to a bare soil surface. The mulch shaded the soil, reducing surface temperature by 8 to 12 degrees on a sunny day in July. Cooler soil lost less moisture to evaporation. Shaded soil retained the rain that infiltrated through the mulch mat instead of losing it to the atmosphere within 48 hours the way bare soil does. The combination, better infiltration from root channels, plus reduced evaporation from mulch cover, gave Garrett's fields approximately 2 inches of additional available soil moisture compared to his neighbor's bare fields at any point during the growing season. In a normal year, 2 inches was margin. In a drought, 2 inches was survival. The soil biology was the third advantage. 14 years of continuous cover cropping had built a biological community in Garrett's soil that bare fields didn't have. The rye roots fed the mycorrhizal fungi, the thread-like organisms that form symbiotic relationships with crop roots and extend the crop's effective root zone by 10 to 100 times. The mycorrhizal network in Garrett's fields was extensive, active, and connected. A living underground internet of fungal threads, linking soil particles, decomposing organic matter, and crop roots in a system that transported water and nutrients from zones of abundance to zones of scarcity. The network was invisible, unmeasurable by the elevator's standards, and worth more than anything the elevator measured, because the network was the infrastructure that kept the crop alive when the rainfall stopped. The organic matter told the integrated story. Garrett's soil organic matter in 2012, 4.9%. The county average on continuously bare winter fields, 3.2%. The 1.7-point difference represented approximately 34,000 pounds per acre of additional organic matter in the top 12 inches, carbon that the cover crop had deposited through 14 years of root growth and residue decomposition. Each percentage point of organic matter holds approximately 20,000 gallons of water per acre. Garrett's 1.7-point advantage stored approximately 34,000 additional gallons per acre. On 560 acres, 19 million gallons of water that Garrett's soil held and his neighbor's soil didn't. Now let me tell you about 2012, because the drought that hit the Midwest in the summer of 2012 was the worst in 25 years. And the 2 inches of additional soil moisture that Garrett's cover crops had built was the difference between a crop and a catastrophe. The 2012 drought began in June. Northwest Missouri received 1.2 inches of rain in June, 4 inches below normal. July was worse, 0.8 inches, 4.5 inches below normal. August, 1.4 inches, 3 inches below normal. The 3-month total, June through August, was 3.4 inches against a normal of 14.9. The deficit was 11.5 inches during the 3 months when corn uses the most water, the months of pollination, grain fill, and kernel development that determine yield. Without water during these months, the corn doesn't pollinate, the ears don't fill, the kernels don't develop, the plant produces a stalk and leaves and a husk, and nothing inside the husk worth harvesting. Daviess County was in the core of the drought. The USDA designated the county as a D3, extreme drought, by mid-July. Crop insurance adjusters began walking fields in early August, documenting the damage. Corn leaves curled tight as cigarettes, tassels firing before the silks emerged, ears with scattered kernel development, plants that had shut down physiologically to survive at the expense of reproduction. The county corn yield in 2012, 78 bushels per acre. The 5-year average, 162. The drought had cut the yield by 52%. Garrett's corn yielded 126 bushels per acre, not 162. Not a normal year. The drought hit his fields too. The same sun, the same heat, the same absent rain. But his corn yielded 126, while the county averaged 78. A 48 bushel advantage. At $7.50 per bushel, the price in August 2012, driven up by the same drought that was destroying the crop. The yield difference was $360 per acre. On 280 acres of corn, half his acreage, the other half was soybeans. $100,800 in additional revenue compared to the county average. $100,800 from 2 inches of soil moisture, from 14 years of planting cereal rye that the elevator called weeds, from $188,000 in cover crop seed that the elevator called a nice tractor planted in the ground. The return on 14 years of cover crop investment arrived in a single season. $100,800 of additional corn revenue that existed because the rye had built the soil moisture reserve, the root channels, the mulch cover, the organic matter, and the mycorrhizal network that kept Garrett's corn alive through a drought that killed 52% of the county's crop. The cover crop investment, $188,000 over 14 years, had paid for itself in one drought. The payback period for 14 years of planting weeds was a single summer. Every year of cover cropping after 2012 was profit, $24 per acre invested against $360 per acre, returned whenever the next drought arrived. And the next drought always arrives. In Missouri, a significant summer drought occurs every 5 to 8 years. The cover crop builds the moisture reserve in the years between droughts, and the reserve pays the dividend when the drought hits. Now let me tell you about what happened at the elevator in August of 2012, because the yield data from the crop insurance adjusters told a story that Rick Conger couldn't dismiss and that the co-op couldn't argue with. The adjusters walked every field in the county. The data was public, posted at the FSA office, discussed at the elevator, compared at the co-op counter, the way yields are always compared in a farming community. The data showed a pattern that had nothing to do with hybrid selection, planting date, fertility program, or any of the variables that farmers usually use to explain yield differences. The pattern was simpler. Fields with cover crops yielded more than fields without cover crops, not by a few bushels, by 30 to 50 bushels per acre. Garrett wasn't the only cover cropper in the county. There were 4 others, small operations, totaling approximately 800 acres of cover-cropped ground. All 5 cover crop operations out-yielded the county average. The range was 118 to 134 bushels per acre on cover-cropped ground versus 68 to 92 on bare ground. The correlation was strong enough that the extension agent included it in her drought summary report to the University of Missouri. Cover-cropped fields in Daviess County consistently out-yielded bare fallow fields by 40 to 60 bushels per acre during the 2012 drought, likely due to improved soil moisture retention from increased organic matter and enhanced infiltration. Rick Conger read the report. He didn't mention it at the counter. He didn't announce Garrett's yield the way he'd been announcing Garrett's cover crop expenses for 14 years. The silence was its own commentary, the quiet recognition that the numbers didn't support the narrative, that the man who'd been planting weeds had out-yielded the county by 48 bushels in the year when yields mattered most. Garrett didn't announce it either. He wasn't the announcing kind. He delivered his corn to the elevator at 126 bushels per acre and collected his check and drove home and planted his cereal rye in October the way he'd planted it every October since 1998, 60 pounds per acre, drilled after harvest, the rye going into the ground while the county's fields went bare. The green field appeared in November. The co-op noticed. Nobody called it weeds. Now, let me tell you about the seed dealer, because the man who sold Garrett his corn seed and his soybean seed and his fertilizer, but not his rye seed, because rye seed wasn't a product the dealership carried, drove to Garrett's farm in October of 2012 and stood at the edge of a field where the cereal rye was already emerging through the corn stubble and said something that changed the way he talked to his customers for the next decade. The dealer's name was Dean Fansler. He ran Fansler Ag Supply out of a shop on Highway 13 south of Gallatin. Seed corn, seed beans, fertilizer, and crop protection products. Dean had been Garrett's seed dealer since 2001, but had never sold him rye seed because Dean didn't carry rye. Rye was a weed to Dean's business model, a crop that competed with his products by reducing the need for them. Cover-cropped fields used less herbicide because the rye mulch suppressed weeds. Cover-cropped fields used less starter fertilizer because the mycorrhizal network mobilized phosphorus more efficiently. Cover-cropped fields used less nitrogen because the rye scavenged residual nitrogen in the fall and released it as it decomposed in the spring, recycling nitrogen that would otherwise leach below the root zone over winter. Every dollar Garrett spent on cover crop seed was a dollar he didn't spend on Dean's products. But in 2012, Dean's customers who didn't use cover crops had harvested 78 bushels per acre, and Garrett had harvested 126. Dean's commission was based on bushels. More bushels meant the customer bought more seed the next year, planted more acres, and consumed more inputs. A customer who harvested 78 bushels was a customer who was losing money and might reduce acreage the next year. A customer who harvested 126 was a customer who was profitable and would plant every acre. Dean drove to Garrett's farm because the 2012 data had forced a recalculation that Dean's product line hadn't anticipated. The cover crop wasn't competing with Dean's products. The cover crop was growing Dean's market. The cover crop was keeping the customer profitable in drought years, which kept the customer farming, which kept the customer buying seed and fertilizer and everything else Dean sold. The cover crop was infrastructure, the thing that kept the farm alive when the rain didn't come, the way a roof keeps a house livable when the weather turns bad. Garrett, Dean, 126 bushels, 126. The county averaged 78. You beat the county by 48 bushels in the worst drought in 25 years. The only variable I can see between your fields and everybody else's is the rye. The hybrid is the same. You're planting the same dekalb as 40 other farmers in the county. The fertility is the same. You're on a standard nitrogen program. The planting date is the same. The only difference is the green stuff growing on your fields in March and the dead stuff laying on your fields in June. the rye. The rye is the easy answer. The real answer is the soil. The rye built the soil for 14 years. The roots, the organic matter, the biology, the infiltration, the water-holding capacity. The rye is the tool. The soil is the product. My soil holds 2 inches more water than the county average. In a normal year, 2 inches is invisible. In 2012, 2 inches was 48 bushels. Why didn't you tell anyone? I told everyone. I told them every year when I planted the rye. I told them what the rye was doing, building organic matter, improving infiltration, reducing erosion, suppressing weeds. I told them the soil was getting better. They saw the green fields and called it weeds. They saw the $24 per acre and called it waste. They saw the mulch and called it a mess. I couldn't make them see the soil because the soil is underground and the corn is above ground and people measure what they can see. Dean went home. In 2013, he added cereal rye seed to his product line. He sold it to 11 farmers the first year. Farmers who had watched Garrett out-yield the county by 48 bushels and who were willing to spend $24 per acre on the chance that the cover crop would do for their soil what it had done for Garrett's. Dean sold the rye with a caveat that Garrett had taught him. The rye doesn't pay in the first year, or the second, or the fifth. The rye pays in the drought year, and the drought year doesn't come on a schedule. The rye is insurance. You pay the premium every fall, and the benefit arrives when the rain doesn't. The adoption was slow. Cover cropping requires faith. The willingness to spend $24 per acre per year on a benefit that's invisible in normal years and transformative in drought years. The faith is hard to maintain when the elevator is still calling it weeds and the neighbors are still pointing at the green fields in March, and the benefit requires a drought to demonstrate. Some of the 11 farmers who started cover cropping in 2013 quit after 2 years of normal rainfall when the yield advantage was only 5 to 8 bushels. Not enough to justify the cost in a year when rain wasn't the limiting factor. Others persisted. By 2018, approximately 6,000 acres in Daviess County were under cover crops, up from Garrett's 560 in 2012. Not a revolution, a beginning. The soil data from those 6,000 acres told the story that the drought had introduced. Organic matter on fields with 5 or more years of continuous cover cropping, 4.1 to 4.6%. Fields without, 3.0 to 3.4%. Infiltration rates on cover cropped fields, 1.4 to 1.7 inches per hour. Bare fields, 0.6 to 0.9 inches per hour. The soil was changing. The cover crop was building something beneath the surface that took years to accumulate, and that proved its value, not in normal years, but in the years when normal failed. The drought years, the flood years, the years when the weather tested the soil, and the soil either held or broke. Let me tell you about how this ends. Garrett Holsinger is 58 years old. He's planted cereal rye every fall for 26 years, since 1998. When he read a University of Missouri Extension bulletin on cover crops and decided to try 40 acres. The 40 acres showed him enough that he expanded to 560 the following year and never stopped. His soil organic matter is now 5.4%, up from the 3.4% he started with in 1998. His infiltration rate is 2.1 inches per hour. nearly triple what it was before cover crops. His soil moisture in July averages 2.4 inches more than the county average at the 24-inch depth. His corn yields in drought years consistently exceed the county by 35 to 50 bushels. His corn yields in normal years exceed the county by 8 to 15 bushels. A smaller advantage, but consistent year after year, the cumulative result of better soil biology, better water management, and better nutrient cycling. The total cost of 26 years of cover cropping, approximately $349,000. Seed, drilling, termination. The total yield advantage over 26 years, compared to county averages and calculated at actual market prices, approximately $620,000. Net benefit, $271,000. The nice tractor planted in the ground had earned enough to buy 6 tractors. The Farmall 756 that Garrett's father Lyle used for drilling sits in the machine shed. Garrett replaced it with a John Deere 750 drill in 2006. But the 756 is maintained. The tractor that drilled the first 40 acres of rye in 1998. The machine that started the experiment that became the system that proved itself in the drought that made the county stop calling it weeds. Rick Conger retired from the elevator in 2019. His replacement doesn't mention Garrett's cover crops at the counter. Cover crops are no longer unusual enough to mention. They're not universal. Most farmers in Daviess County still leave their fields bare through winter because the $24 per acre is a visible cost, and the 2 inches of soil moisture is an invisible benefit, and the human preference for visible over invisible hasn't changed. But the farmers who cover crop, the 40 operations working approximately 12,000 acres in the county by 2024, don't explain themselves anymore. The drought of 2012 explained for them the bare fields crusted, the green fields held. The difference was 48 bushels and 2 inches of water and 14 years of planting a crop that nobody could see a reason for until the rain stopped falling. That's the whole story. Subscribe to The Average Farmer for more. We'll see you in the next one.